In February 2013, three opposition parties, the ACN, CPC and ANPP, came together to form the All Progressives Congress. 2 years later, in 2015, the APC pulled off a political upset, defeating the PDP, which had ruled Nigeria for 16 straight years since 1999. Fast forward to May 2025, and the APC has now spent a full decade in power, 8 years under Muhammadu Buhari, and 2 under President Bola Tinubu. It's a milestone, no doubt, but it also raises big questions. Has the party truly delivered the progressive governance it promised? Or are we still hearing the same promises repeated every Independence Day? And that's a fair question, especially after a recent review of Nigeria's Independence Day speeches. And what it showed was a cycle of recurrent pledges in areas of unity, security, and development from one government to the next in the past 65 years. Governor Uzodinma, who chairs the Progressive Governors Forum, has now attempted to document this decade in his new book, A Decade of Impactful Progressive Governance in Nigeria. He calls it a record of transformation. But how objective is it? The book reviewer is here with me, Professor Bennett Nwaguma. Welcome to Beyond the Headlines.
Well, thank you very much.
Prof, this book comes from an active APC governor who also chairs the Progressive Governors Forum. From the surface, it's easy to see it as public relations document rather than an objective historical record. What do you think?
Well, when you tell your story, you're allowed to be kind to yourself. Beyond that, I think it's a very fair and objective, because the author openly acknowledges where they've not delivered exactly on their promises.
But the title itself talks about impactful progressive governance. And just before we start this conversation, I was jokingly saying that impact can either be positive or negative. What clear evidence, does this author present in such a way to tell us that Nigeria has indeed progressed in the last 10 years?
Yes, because there are chapters dedicated to sectors: the economy, the fight against insecurity, the anti-corruption campaigns. There's also a section on Nigerian foreign policy. There's a section on inclusiveness, and so in chapter 4, which is the kernel of this book, there's a long list of improvements that have brought to the state of infrastructure, the economy. They highlighted the reforms in the economic sector, the reforms in the petroleum industry, the gas sector, etc. And these are easy to see.
Prof, from your gray hair, I can tell that you've been here before me, right?
Well, yes.
Yeah. So a recent review of Independence Day speeches show that every leader since 1960 has repeated similar pledges: jobs, power, security, unity. They say it's the same cycle, in over 6 decades. How does this book set the APC's decade apart from the long chain of unfulfilled promises that Nigerians still talk about today?
Yeah, but the issue of promises is not exclusive to Nigeria. If you were to listen to any state broadcast in any other country, you're going to find the government of the day making promises, improving health, improving...
No, the challenge with us is that we are promising the same thing.
It's the same thing. All the indices by which development is measured are the promises that governments all over the world come up with, from Europe to America and the rest of Africa. That's all promises, which is what progress is all about, really, improving on the present state of things. So Nigeria is not...
this book is trying to convince us that the past 10 years has improved the quality of life of Nigerians, right?
Well, that's the claim, yes. And you can see that in some sectors, to be honest. And there's a very interesting chapter. I'm hoping to get a chance to read the book. There's a very interesting chapter where the author compares 10 years of, the 10 years before APC took over and the 10 years since APC has been in charge. There's another chapter, too, where the author makes bold to take on the common criticisms of the APC administrations in the last 10 years. And in that, he clearly highlights the fact that, yes, progress has been slower than they imagined in some sectors, and progress has been quite, phenomenal in some others. But as always, it's a job in progress. Development is always work in progress.
I am looking forward to read the book, but I read the synopsis, which I guess was written by you. the author argues that Nigerian politics still has ideology and that APC stands for progressive values. We have seen in the past 10 years how easy it's been for politicians to leave one party for the other. It's an absolute contrary of a party ideology. The author himself, as at 2003, was with the AC. As at the time the APC was formed in 2013, it was with the PDP. So how do we talk about party ideology when you can be APC in the morning or PDP in the morning and ADC in the afternoon?
Yes, I'll give you an example that will answer that. Then I'll come up with additional information. Would it surprise you to know that the current president of the United States joined the Republican Party only in 2009? Before then, he was a Democrat. That's surprising, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's just one out of how many?
No, but
out of about 45 presidents of the United States.
No, but in the United States, that's very significant.
But you agree with me that the rate of change in Nigeria is not something that we can compare with the kind of ideology we've seen in the U.S.
Yes, but in the U.S., which is, if you like, synonymous with democracy, if you like, party democracy, it's a very significant analogy that the president of the United States was a Democrat up until 2009, and he joined and got the ticket and became the president, two-time president. But that said, one interesting thing I read out of this book, which I got and internalized, is the fact that in chapter 1, where the author tries to trace progressive governance, progressive politics in Nigeria, he traced it all the way to the pre-independence era. And he said that all the nationalist movements of the pre-independence era, the NCNC, the Action Group, the NUPU, NNDP, all had progressive content in them. And it was necessary at the time because the citizens had become tired of, quote, oppressive colonial rule and needed an improvement on that. And so if all these parties, all the way to the Second, Third, and Fourth Republic, had progressive content in them, a progressive-minded politician who goes from one party with progressive content to another party with progressive content can feel at home.
It's just that for the average Nigerian, they believe that what informed the party upon which a politician runs in Nigeria is a function of their chances of winning an election.
But
and there's evidence that backs that up.
That's exactly what Trump did. That's what Trump did. He was asked sometime before he joined the Republican Party if he had plans of running for the presidency and which party that would be. And he said, well, it's the party that gives me the ticket.
I like the Trump example.
Enough to give me that ticket.
I like the Trump example.
It's a good one.
But the Republican and Democratic Party in the U.S. have defined ideology. Charlie Kirk, that was killed recently, speaks to the heart of that story, that there is what the Democrats believe in fundamentally, which is very different from, what conservatives like Republicans believe in. Have we seen that type and shadow, or at least a shadow of it in Nigeria?
No, I would say no. That makes it easier, therefore. The argument is that it makes it easier for people to go from one party to the other in Nigeria than it is in the U.S., where the two parties, as you said, are miles apart. And somebody goes from one party to another party, and not only did he join the party, he got a ticket, got elected 2 times. And now he's proven to be, forgive me, more Republican than those who were there. You know what I'm talking about.
I'll give you an example. What happened recently in Delta. 2 weeks or 3 weeks before the entire political structure decamped to APC, the PDP was still at APC's throat, calling the government bad at its core, swearing by fire and brimstone that the government wasn't going to decamp. All changed instantly overnight. I mean, it's just amazing how these things happen, and it's difficult to really convince Nigerians otherwise because of the things we've seen over and over and over in the past decade.
That's correct. It happened in Akwa Ibom State, happened in, with some restrictions in Rivers State, and it's going to happen in a few more states.
Absolutely. That's what we're hearing as well. Let's talk about the Buhari and Tinubu eras, because that's pretty much what these 10 years is all about.
Yes.
Both have had their own fair share of critical evaluation across board. There are some who would tell you that it was difficult for Tinubu to win an election in 2023 because of the performance of his predecessor. Which of these two periods better fits the description of impactful, what's that book again? Impactful progressive governance. Was that addressed in the book?
Well, I would say both, but we're comparing 8 years of Buhari administration to only 2 years of Tinubu administration. So that time difference should be factored in, to be honest. And Buhari had 2 times of 4 years each, and the current president has been there for just 2 years. But then this book talks about the policies in the last 10 years, the policies, the programs in the last 10 years. And they take credit for the things they've done very well, and also accept responsibility for the things that haven't done so well. But as you would expect, ends with a promise that having laid what they consider a good foundation for the economy and infrastructure, that the next 10 years hopefully will be a lot better, which is what you expect.
I understand the time disparity, but in just 2 years, we've seen subsidy removal, we've seen exchange rate reform, which have been attributed to both decisions made by the current president. But Nigerians are still struggling with that, with inflation and rising costs. And I hear politicians say that this is good for us, but we always play down the reality of the average Nigerian, where the shoe pains them, their quality of life 2 years ago, when the price of fuel was pretty much lower than what we currently buy it now. Does the author confront these hardships honestly, or he justifies them as necessary pain, as we've heard in the past years?
Well, a bit of both. A bit of both. He acknowledges that, yes, it was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was a necessary medication to be taken. And the president has said that over and over again, that we couldn't go beyond the point where this subsidy had to be removed. Yes, the impact on the people at the lower end of the ladder, which includes you and I, is hurtful. But we're staying hopeful that all the promises that reforms come with will be handed down, will come. Like they say, a light at the end of the tunnel, or as the president said recently, we've turned the corner. And so,
when you say you and I like to believe that you are a little bit higher here and I am somewhere here. You're not as sure. A journalist.
You're not sure.
You talked about foreign policy earlier, because we're running out of time now, and I'm sure that this book also celebrates Nigeria's foreign policy. But ECOWAS is at one of its weakest moments as we speak. We can't forget in a moment that Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso walked away. Does the book engage these contradictions as well?
Yes, it acknowledges that the exit of these 3 countries, the Sahel states, they call them, from ECOWAS was a low moment in the history of ECOWAS. And we know why they left. It was the military administration in which ECOWAS frowned at and threatened the countries with sanctions, and they felt like walking away. Yeah, he did confront it, yes. Yeah, like I told you, it's a frank assessment of.
Yeah, perhaps what they're saying is that the regional bloc, that ECOWAS hasn't really done a good job in calling its member states to order, that it waits until when everything now blows in its face before threatening a military action. But as an academic, would you confidently recommend this book to students as a reliable source of political history, or would you caution them to read it with a critical eye?
Well, the history part of this book can't be faulted. There's a rich history, there's a rich content, very rich content of the history of political evolution. Like I said, from the pre-independence era through the first, the second, the third, and now the Fourth Republic. All the parties and how they came to be, their ideologies, and how the leaders and what happened to them, all the way to the Fourth Republic are in chapter 1. You can't fault that. Now, when somebody's telling his story, you also, like I said before, you're allowed to use the kindest words. But I think this is the fairest that an author who is telling his story can be.
So if the APC hopes to tell another story 10 years from now, I'm asking you a personal question now. What do you think must change for the story to be genuinely transformational and not just impactful on paper?
Well, in the next 10 years, 5 years, if you like, I would expect that all the promises, the sweet promises of the reforms would have become reality. And hopefully that would now impact, as you said, impact on everything, or impact on inflation, impact on poverty, impact on employment, etc.
10 years in power is a major milestone, but history will judge not just by promises or pages, but by progress. Governor Uzodinma's book may be a celebration of achievement, but it also opens the door for honest reflection on what still hasn't changed. And I'm hoping that in the coming days, we're going to have those honest conversations. Professor Benetton Wagoma, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much.